Hey gang, this episode is sponsored by Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kid's investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. The cool thing is that this is an online account and you can set it up. It'll take you about 5 minutes, honestly. It's maybe $1 a day is like the minimum, is a little bit, you should put more in. Now, remember, kids, they can't invest when they're minors. So an UGMA, a Uniform Gift to Minors Act account, this can allow you to invest on their behalf, but you can also teach them about investing and also give them plenty of time for that investment to grow. Invested funds can be used for education, plus anything else like summer camps, band equipment, clubs, sports. That is so expensive now. And when they're adults, they can use the funds for their first home or maybe even to start their own business. There are no contribution limits. There are multiple tax advantages, and they're SIPC insured up to $500,000. No commissions, just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. So go to meetfabric.com/Jill and start investing in your child's future today. That's meetfabric.com/Jill, MEET, fabric.com/Jill. Welcome to Jill on Money, powered by The Compound. I am Jill Schlesinger, and I am ecstatic about the guest today because we've known each other for a little bit, and we've known of each other for a little bit longer, so we sort of feel like we're half-sisters. Blair duQuesnay, your title is Queen of Ritholtz Wealth Management.
I love it.
Is that a good title?
I love it.
Do you want to retitle yourself?
Just ask Josh about it. He has a thing about titles. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
You are actually a Ritholtz Wealth Advisor, right?
Correct.
And you don't like saying that you're a financial advisor. I'm so proud that I was a financial advisor. I just think it's really like one of the hardest jobs ever. So we were just talking before we went on the air, and you said you don't tell people that, or you think that people don't want to ask you questions. Like, what's up with that?
I am definitely proud to be a financial advisor.
Yeah.
I'm talking about in small talk situations in social settings.
Yeah.
Where somebody says, what do you do? Because it's like the thing that we do in America.
Uh-huh.
And I always just decided to say, I'm a financial advisor, which generally means there's no follow-up question.
But I don't understand that, because whenever anyone figures out what I do, first they want gossip about CBS News, and second they want to ask me a financial question. And I think it's sort of funny, like, oh, yes, you should get all of your financial advice both from a podcast person as well as someone who's on television like that. But here's my question to you. How'd you get into this business? You are the queen of Ritholtz Wealth Management. I want to know the ascension to the throne. What happened?
Wow. So I scraped and crawled my way to get here.
Really? Did you elbow people? Did you step on someone's throat to get here?
I hope not.
Yeah, you
not
might have,
purpose.
though.
They would have to tell you because I don't remember. But I went to school and said, I like numbers and math. Let me think about business. And then I kind of was drawn to finance and the markets and fell in love and wanted to be an investment banker.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you know about being an investment banker?
Probably what I saw in the movies.
What was that movie? What was the shaping moment of your life?
Wall Street.
But that would have been, you would have been a trader, not a banker.
Right.
Okay. But wait a second. You grew up in New Orleans?
No, I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama.
Oh, okay. You grew up in Alabama. You live in New Orleans now.
Correct.
What was going on in Montgomery, Alabama, where you growing up? Like, what was the main industry where smart kids from your school went, like, funneled into? Where'd they go?
The professions, law, accounting, doctors.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole lot of industry
Uh-huh.
in Montgomery. I haven't lived there in more time than I've been gone.
Okay.
So
but it's formative.
It is formative.
Right?
Yes.
And were your parents in financial industries or not?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Okay. So you go to school and you're like, oh, I love numbers. And why not just be an accountant? How is it that you came into this world?
Yeah. I was at the University of Georgia, which has an amazing accounting program, but it was very brutal. And even my friends who thought they wanted to be accountants after that first semester of the testing dropped out and went into risk management because it also had a good risk management program.
Okay.
I just happened to fall in love with this concept of time value of money and stocks and the markets and how they worked. So I just went down that route, even though loved my finance teachers, University of Georgia did not have a great pipeline to work for the finance sector.
Okay. And Georgia are the Bulldogs, right?
Yes.
Okay. Look at the face.
2 times national champions.
Okay. Do you want to say more about this? Like, are you all in? Is this like where your heart lies always or not?
It was a wonderful experience. If you've got to pick an SEC school,
Yeah.
Georgia's the best. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but it had a music scene. It had obviously the big sports, big school feel, great business school, great law school, veterinary school, you name it. Great experience. Met my best friends there. We're still friends for life. So yeah, great experience.
All right. I like that. Okay. So you graduate. What's your first job?
So I was looking on monster.com
Of
because
course,
this is where
the monster board
things were listed. And I went for a job, an institutional job, because by the way, I was pulled to meet with all the investment banks because I was in the top 10% of my class.
Of course you were.
While I was on campus, but none of them hired me.
Why is that? Because they're biased against women or biased against Southerners?
Well, this was the South, and these were those Charlotte banks, right?
Okay.
So probably the fact that I was a woman, but at one point, they would do the dinner on the night before, then they would do the Super Saturday thing, and dinner the night before is where they really make their decision.
Oh.
And I remember getting a comment, "You have a dog? I don't even have time to keep a goldfish alive." So I was probably out at that point. So anyway, didn't get any of those jobs. So I'm looking on monster.com. I'm living in Atlanta, which is an hour away from University of Georgia in Athens. And I see a job at UBS for an institutional fixed income job. Bombed the interview, rode down the elevator with a broker who said, "What were you here for?" "Oh, you went to the University of Georgia. We love to hire alumni. Why don't you come be my sales assistant?" And that's how I got started.
Get out of here. Do you know why they call it UBS? Because the real logo is we put U before the BS. All right, I'm just a little joke about the Swiss banks. They don't have any humor anyway.
It's PaineWebber. I mean, this was.
So you were in the old PaineWebber before it was absorbed by UBS?
They had just dropped. Remember, they bought it, and it was UBS PaineWebber, and they were just changing over the business cards to drop the PaineWebber. But all those guys were PaineWebber or Dean Witter or wherever they had come from.
So what did you learn as a sales assistant?
I learned how to deal with angry people on the phone.
Oh, yes.
I learned how to bind presentations, with different tabs in them.
Yes.
For institutional clients.
Very useful today, the binding.
Very useful.
It's like a label maker.
Exactly. So, and the best thing I learned was how to talk to clients on the phone. But I learned how to do Fed fund wires. I learned how to open trust accounts and IRA accounts. And
let's get back to the part about the people who are angry on the phone.
Yeah.
So that to me is actually an incredibly important skill to learn, right? You could go work at an airline, probably in a call center, and learn that. But when people are so completely losing their minds, what was your approach? What did you learn to do with that? Because you're young. It's
22.
hard. Yeah.
At first I freaked out. I mean, internally, right?
Yeah.
Not externally, but I'd be freaking out on the phone saying, "Oh, we're going to get this done. Don't worry." And by the way, there's not a lot of training. There would be a weekly staff meeting where they'd say all these acronyms. I really had no idea what they were saying for the first 6 months. And one of the first things I had to do was wire money for a real estate closing. And I really didn't have a lot of help. And they're sitting at the table trying to close the real estate transaction. So they were angry for a reason. And I was trying to figure out how to do it for the first time.
So what's the takeaway from this whole process of learning to talk to people on the phone? Would you say that that's probably like one of the most important skills that you acquired in the first, say, 5 years of your career?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
How to talk to clients. Do you know that's so funny that you say that? Because I remember when I was an advisor 100 years ago, and I had this little tiny company, and I would listen to some of the younger financial advisors on the phone. And I would come in after and I would say, "Okay, what do you think you did well on that call?" And there are certain places where they listen to you on the phone, but this was not, because we were not in a sales organization. It was very different.
Right.
And I would say, your job is not to actually solve the problem in that moment, because you can't solve the problem. The problem is they are freaking out. You just want to try to get them to bring the volume down. And we would have these conversations and they would say, "Well, what do we do?" I said, "Just let them blow. It's okay. They got to let their steam off." And it's kind of follows you through life that when people need to blow off steam, trying to interrupt and interject is kind of hard, right? So what do you do now when that happens? Not that it happens very much because you have the best clients in the world.
Sit in silence. Listen. It took me a while to get comfortable with silence, but later on in my career, I was told I was hired because they thought I was a good listener.
So if you looked at the job of being a sales assistant, going to an advisor, and there's a big gap, right? Can you talk a little bit about the difference between working in more of a sales-first organization versus a consultancy or an advisor-based organization? What's the difference?
Absolutely. So the way that I made that transition was through the financial crisis and layoffs.
Oh, there you go.
Not by choice, because I'm not a quitter, especially in my mid-20s with rent in Manhattan, right? So I was sort of forced, and the universe or luck stepped in and got introduced to someone we both know who runs an RIA, Michael Goodman, and got hired. I did not know that there was a different way. I didn't know that what looks exactly the same on paper and similar investments and services from a sales-based culture to an advice-based culture could be completely different.
Tell me more about that. So in the Payne Weber UBS world, you watch people try to do the same thing, which is get a client relationship. And in a old Wirehouse model, how do they convince people to come in the door and close that transaction?
Well, at first they give the trainees a phone book. And so that's the good reason. That's the good thing about starting as a sales assistant is I didn't have that experience because I would have burned out and gone and done something else. But they're all networking, they're playing golf, whatever it is that they do to meet people. I was once told, oh, once you have kids, you'll have a great way to meet people because they'll all be in sports together or whatever.
But then what's the pitch? Like, come to me, I will find the best mutual fund for you. And instead of paying a 5.25%, it'll be a back-ended load. It'll be a B share. Like, what's the pitch in 2006 or 7?
Yeah. Well, what were they putting clients in? Yes. A lot. Well, first of all, in that sales-based organization, every office is a different business. It's a different investment philosophy. It's a different strategy. So it depends on which team you're on.
Okay.
I happen to be on a team that did consulting for retirement plans, 401k plans, did financial plans back in the day.
Which is like a big deal because a lot of those big firms didn't want to do financial plans because they were like, don't put anything down on paper. We don't want to ask for a lawsuit.
Exactly.
Right.
Did financial plans, and not just to sell expensive mutual funds, but sometimes mutual funds were the conduit, those wrap fee programs or managed accounts back in, they probably still exist, separately managed accounts. But essentially, I lucked out. I didn't necessarily start on a team that was, you'd see everything from all I do is put a point on muni bonds on the way in and the way out, or UITs, or flipping various commission-based products. But there were as many different business models in the sales organization office as there were advisors.
Is that still the case in the big firms?
I think so.
Really?
It's been a long time.
I know. Yes, but people. I don't even know because I really don't. I know a few people in that world, and they tend to be the people who are like, well, I'm a CFP, and they really would rather me not be a CFP for all those years when they were like, I have to actually be a fiduciary because this is important to me. And the firm would be like, no, you don't. Don't say that to anybody. We're not held to fiduciary standard. We don't have to put anyone first. We're first. So when you go to Michael Goodman over to Wellstream Advisors, what are you doing there? Are you hired as an advisor?
Well, I was hired as an analyst.
Okay.
Because along the way, I went from sales assistant to analyst in the branch because I was taking the CFA exams at the time, and I sort of got my way over out of sort of an assistant role into more of a branch management
You were
role.
a CFA already? Or you were in the process?
I believe I was taking level 3 when he hired me. Wow. So I got my letters quite.
Gang, if you're CFPs, you know that you couldn't take the CFA. It's way harder. I know that too. That is so, and it is hard. What did that do for you just to have a credential like that?
At first, I thought I would get the credential and then somebody was going to offer me this big salary.
Then I said, wait a minute, maybe not.
That didn't happen. However, the best thing about getting the CFA charter is, first of all, you've proven that you can go through this rigorous exam process and learn how stocks are valued and options are valued and all of the complicated things that are on those tests. But it's a community. It is a global community of investment professionals, like-minded investment professionals who are dedicated to making the world a better place for investors. So once I got involved in volunteering in my local society and going to global conferences and meeting people from vast amount of countries, all with CFA charters, then I realized this is what's special.
Okay, wait a second. What's the dope on the CFA? Like, let's do a little comparison of personality types. Okay, so let's say there's a CPA, there's a CFA, and a CFP. What are the personality types, do you think? Let's talk in broad generalizations that everyone will get pissed off at us. Okay, so let's start first with a CPA. Like, who is that person, do you think?
Well, the CPA and the CFA, the way you tell the difference is that the CFA is looking at your shoes and the CPA is looking at his or her
an old
shoes.
joke, an old CPA joke, which I love.
So CPAs, I always say CPA, they are precise. CFA and CFP, accurate, right? So it's that precision, that attention to detail. We have a balance sheet here. Let's go through each piece of evidence to make sure that it's properly footnoted and notated. And that's a benefit of having learned to be a financial planner from CPAs is I still don't have that precision as a natural instinct, but knowing that everything that you put on a financial plan needs to be documented or you need to know where that information came from. They're precise.
But a CFA and a CFP are more accurate than precise? Is that what you're saying?
I would say. And accurate doesn't mean wrong.
No.
It's
I
just-
get you.
yeah,
I
it's a
get you.
different
It's
level of detail.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Michael is a CPA, but then I felt like he had too much personality to be a CPA. Sorry, CPAs. So what about the idea of how you interact with clients, where you come from, like the personal finance universe? If you come from a CFA background versus a CFP background, what's the difference there?
CFA is much more focused on how money is managed, right? So it used to be CFAs were working in, on the buy side, on the institutional investment side, not as much in wealth management. That's changed. A lot more CFAs are client-facing nowadays. And so whereas CFP is literally everything you actually need to know on the book side to do financial planning.
Do you have a CFP designation also?
I do.
So it is easier, obviously.
I would say, although we just had a young person that passed the CFP a couple of weeks ago here, Nate, shout out to Nate. And he found out at like 2 p.m. on the day he took the test.
What?
Which I thought was hilarious because I took a test for a day and a half and then waited 2 months to get a letter in the mail.
Okay, I agree. I was that also. When I did the CFP, so there's early CFPs. I have a friend of mine who got her CFP designation very early on. She goes, "Oh my God, it was so easy."
I thought it was like years long though. Back then.
No. The first iteration was like literally like as easy as the Series 7, which is a silly test. Okay, so sorry, gang. Shout out to those Series 7 registered reps. Step up and do your work. Okay, so it was like the 80s. The early CFP was sort of like an easy generalized test. Then it became really hard. So it was like the mid 80s till like the 2000s. You probably took it later. And I had a 2-day test also. I had a 2-day test and I had to do all the units. Some people do this in college, actually. Now there are beautiful CFP programs in your schools, which are amazing. And then you have to do the actual, put the hours in to get your work qualification. But when I was doing it, I had no time for classes, so I did self-study. And I took each unit. And so it was like 6 units and you took a test for each unit. And it did take, you're right, like 2 years. And then you sat for a 2-day exam.
Right.
And I did wait many, many, many weeks to get the positive results. Which
in the
was
mail.
Great. In the mail, for sure. And once I had it, I said, I will never never let this lapse. And even to I don't need my CFP anymore. I really don't. It's been 15 years since I've been giving financial advice. I never let it lapse. I would never want to ever take that exam again. And also, I like it. Like, it is kind of a nice thing when you do your continuing ed. You're like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool. That you have to know a lot of stuff.
Right.
So what's hard about the job you have? Like, what's your challenge?
It doesn't leave you.
Tell me more.
You can't just go, you can't just go home and have a weekend. Like some of my friends who work in medicine, if they're not in front of that client, that patient, that's not, it doesn't even exist to them unless they're on call. And, it lives in these relationships. These are people you get to know their families, you get to know what matters to them, and they live in your head. And sometimes you worry about them, especially if you think, oh, I sent an email last week and I haven't heard back. I wonder if something happened. So it's a lot. And it's just, and I love it, and I'm meant to do it, and I know that I ended up in the right place, but you really are holding people's hopes and dreams and everything about them on yourself. They're probably not thinking about me at all unless we have
they're
meetings.
Thinking about you. Believe me, they're thinking about you. I think that's so spot on. It's one of the reasons I left the business, because I felt the weight of it was bearing down on me. And I have two very close friends who are doctors, and I experience the same thing. Like, they worry about their patients. My one friend's a surgeon, so she's kind of like, once the surgery is over and the follow-up's over, that's a lot easier. And the other one is like a derm pathologist, so she gets very enmeshed in some of the people. Like, she has to call people and say, you have cancer. Like, that's intense, right? But she does have a mechanism to shut it down. I did not have a good mechanism for that. And I got so vested in people not following the steps that I thought were really important.
Right.
And I think that was a really tough thing for me. I don't think I did that well. I think I got overly and emotionally involved with these clients who probably loved me for it. Some did, some didn't. But it was draining, and I had a hard time with that. So how do you stay fresh in the industry carrying that weight?
Yeah. A lot of crazy yoga.
What kind of crazy yoga?
Ashtanga.
Oh, you're moving a lot. You're moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're young.
Very early in the morning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of funny. I feel like the worse of a yogi you are, the more gymnastics you have to do to get your mind right. But I gotta, I try to start a lot of days of the week, doing crazy yoga. And that helps. And then I have a family, so that forces me, right? I have 2 young kids, and I have no choice. I have to go pick them up.
How old are your kids?
7 and 4.
Oh my God, they are really young. I forget you're very young. And do either of them show an acumen for numbers?
So my son can solve a Rubik's Cube in less than 2 minutes, which I blew my mind. Now, he was told the steps. His teacher taught him the steps. But clearly he can do puzzles. He seems to be very strong in both math and reading. My daughter just finished pre-K, so we'll see.
She's a genius,
She's
obviously.
more of a people person, I think.
All right, we'll get her on the sales side. Is your spouse in the business as well?
No.
Okay.
He's an entrepreneur who, when our first son was born, became a stay-at-home dad.
Really?
Which is the best thing that ever happened to any of us. It is a true joy.
That's amazing. You must be making a pile of cash. Good for you.
I live in New Orleans, not New York. But
So,
everything has worked out, which has been a lovely.
So can we just talk a little bit about the job of advisor a little more? Because I was like the ambassador for the CFP board for a couple of years.
I didn't know that.
Hey, Kevin. Hey, what up? And I was happy to, they really wanted me to sort of be a face and voice and do videos, but also go out on the road and talk to people and try to extol the virtues of being a CFP and being, having a financial advisory practice. And I always thought, it's a kind of a shitty job to have early on because you're building your book and it's hard and you're learning and all of that. But once you kind of up and running, and I think it's a great job to be a parent because in many ways, you're right. It is a little bit 24/7, but you can kind of carve out hours. So talk a little bit about what it's like to be a parent who is in an advisory practice and sell it to the young wannabe financial advisors, CFPs and CFAs out there.
You hit the nail on the head. But it is a process of getting your client base to a point where you have that flexibility. You have to work underneath another senior advisor and pay your dues and all of the rest. But at the end of the day, I send out a calendar link to my clients. I can block out any times I want. When I find out that the Christmas pageant is going to be at school on Tuesday at 11 p.m. or 11:30 or 11 a.m. or 11:30, I can block that off, whereas a surgeon cannot. So that's where it is a wonderful work-life balance, despite the fact that
it's not really balance. It's just all work.
It's work
all
and
the
life.
time.
It's
work
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I can set I'm not going to take a call until after I've done my yoga practice, and then make exceptions to that when needed. But you do have control over your time. But if you have too many clients, you're still going to be busy.
Right. And, I want to kind of let's go into this working parent thing because so in 2014, this is a funny thing. I was asked to do a big event for Deutsche Bank. They used to call it the Women of Wall Street. It was a big conference they did for the women who worked in the firm and their clients. And so they came to me and they were like, you know how to talk finance, but, you're also a good interviewer. Come do this thing. So they said, we're going to have you moderate a panel of some of the companies we just brought public, led by women. There were not that many choices. Let's be clear.
Okay. Like a panel?
Yeah,
or
a panel
an
or
interview?
a few people. There was 3 people. And it was one banker and 2 women who okay. So, but it was fun. And they said, we also have a big name one-on-one interview we would like you to conduct. And I said, great. And I said, who is it? And they said, Shonda Rhimes. And I was like, what? Amazing. Fantastic. I had never I kind of went crazy. I literally started watching every single thing she'd ever done to that point. And, it was cool because, she's so intimidating. She's so successful. And at the time, her company, Shondaland, had 600 employees and she's like a rock star, and she was not groomed to be an entrepreneur and run a business. She's a writer. Mm. So it was interesting because it was a little daunting. Okay. And it was funny to kind of, we were talking about her background and what happened and how the success begat success. And I said, so you've got 3 kids, you're a single mom. How do you manage this? Because I said, there's a lot of working moms in this audience. She looks out into the audience and she kind of smiles a little bit. And she goes, I know that I'm talking to a certain type of woman here. So you either have money or so you can maybe hire people to help you or you have a very helpful spouse. That's great. She said, the way I think about being a woman who is running a company and being a parent is that I'm failing every single day. And the audience gasped.
Wow.
She said, here's how I think of it. One of those roles is going to give. And she goes, and don't be afraid of being a failure in either of those roles because it's just going to happen. You have to be nicer to yourself was essentially her message. And she was like, so she tells this great story. She's like, let me give you an example. My daughter has a pageant of some sort. She's in a play. And she said, and it's the same day that is Sandra Oh's last day on the set of Grey's Anatomy. She goes, I had to pick between those 2 things. Mm-hmm. I could not be in 2 places at once. And whichever one I picked, I would feel like a failure to the other. And I thought it was really, first of all, the women in the audience went completely bananas because these are not failure type people.
Right. Type A's.
They are hyper type A's. Right. And there were 2,200 women in the audience. Okay. And I thought it was nice to hear from someone who's so successful and say, I just have to accept that. I have to be nicer to myself about that. Mm. And I think that's such a challenge of being a parent in this world right now. You're always on. You have great respect, especially in a client-based world. And do you want to know what she picked? What do you think she picked?
Sandra Oh?
Yeah. No, not.
She did
the kid.
Not?
No, she picked the kid.
She's a better mom than me.
Blair's like, I had a chance to close a $10 million client or go to my kid's pageant. Bye, honey. She said it was like Sandra Oh kind of let her off the hook. It was kind of easy. And she didn't feel like her 10-year-old could let her off of the hook.
Yeah.
So do you come up against this all the time?
I don't.
Why not?
But I'm also not running a 600-person company.
Okay,
right?
Fair enough.
I am running a very high volume advisory practice. Mm-hmm. So I kind of get to pick and choose. And so far, although, my daughter hasn't started her extracurriculars.
Right.
So we'll see.
Do you have other advisors you work with?
I do. Alan is working with me in New Orleans, and he is wonderful. And he also has young children. So he also gets to do this. I need to leave early for T-ball and all of that. Yeah.
And who's doing the actual work? Because you're just the front part people.
Okay, Alan's doing a lot of the work. He's fabulous, and he's a CFP.
Okay.
Yes.
So talk to me about what happens. I hear you on this podcast, and I'm like, I have got to work with Blair. What happens? I call the office, and what happens next?
I would recommend you go on our website and fill out the talk to an advisor form rather than call in.
Okay, I'm a little old. I use the phone.
But you could call in and ask for me, and then they'll take down your information,
Okay.
and then I'll get back to you. So I am at the point where I do have to be selective about taking new clients.
You have minimums?
Unofficially $7 million.
I got to have $7 million to do business with you?
Yeah, you might need to do some more podcasts.
Jesus Christ. All right, $7 million. It's a good number.
However, if a client refers somebody, even sometimes even referrals with less than $1 million, I can't say no, especially when it's women.
Oh,
when they refer women, I have a lot of women that I work with who are not super wealthy, but they need the help, and I have a soft spot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that seems fair. And when you go through this process, there's an intake and someone wants to work with you. How detailed is your financial planning process? Like when I was first in the business, because I was so young, I kind of wanted to make this I think I'll make this like a Stanford Business School study of your personal financial life. And people were like, oh, I'm so bored. This is like 50 pages into this plan.
Mm-hmm.
So what does a plan look like when I hire you, Blair?
Yeah. It's all on the screen these days. No more printing.
Yeah.
You can print it if you want to log in yourself and print it, but most people don't. It lives live on the screen. I always say the financial plan is like a garden. We're always tending to it. We're always weeding something, changing something. So we review it on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to log in, you can review it on the screen as well. I've been doing a lot more goals-based planning than cash flow-based planning. So for those of you who are CFPs, in the cash flow-based plan, you have to put down all of the expenses in the year that they're coming. And but in the goals-based planning, you just kind of have some goals. Like, I know that my daughter's going to go to college in 2035 or whatever it might be. I want to try to retire at this age. Here's my lifestyle. So it requires a lot less data entry.
Oh, that's good.
It's a little looser, but I still think that's where I'm accurate, not precise, like the CPA, right? I know that directionally I can tell based on the size of the portfolio and the level of spending and the sources of income, back of the envelope a lot of times, is somebody going to be okay? And to be quite frank, if you've got $7 million or more, you're probably going to be okay. It's not necessarily about getting that financial plan perfect. It's about figuring out, all right, where are there efficiencies that can be found? Where are there tax planning? Where can I go and add value on the estate side? How can I invest more tax efficiently and whatnot? So the plan is some numbers and some squiggles on a screen and a conversation, more importantly.
And how often do you talk to your big, fat, wealthy clients who, I don't know what they're doing for a living, but they're big, fat, wealthy people with $7 million?
All kinds of different things. At the most, once a month. And that's the clients that want to speak the most frequently. It's generally about quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seems fair.
I mean, I kind of have to remember sometimes I might be like a doctor in a way. Like, I don't really love going to my doctor or my dentist, even though they're great. Like, it's not like the first thing on my list. And sometimes I have to remember, like, they're not really like waiting around for me to call all the time.
Yes. Right. Exactly. So when you do goals-based planning, does that mean that you're not saying to somebody how much money do you spend every year? Or do you still have to get that piece of it because I always find it's kind of the tough one. It's like no matter how much or how little you have, just tell me how much you're spending. And people are like, I don't know. How do you get that out of them?
Nobody knows how much they're spending. Most of the time, I don't recommend trying to figure all of that out. Maybe if you're just starting out and you need some budgeting basics, you need to figure it all out. Essentially, I have this philosophy of pay yourself first.
Yes.
So just put it all in the savings, and whatever, as long as you're maxing out your savings, whatever's left, just spend it on what you spend it.
Right.
And so as long as we can put in the appropriate savings amount and we know they're going to hold to that, then we don't necessarily have to go into the details of what they're spending. Now,
but how do you then do retirement planning without that number, right? So if your fat cat is spending $500,000 a year today, you have to know that to do the planning, right?
Right. So that's where it becomes, I know what the big expenses are. So I go, okay, well, for example, do you have a mortgage? How much is that? What's your property tax? How much is your homeowner's insurance? Probably a lot more than it was 3 years ago, if it's anything like New Orleans. And so I can get those big categories and then, kind of figure it out. And then we go through a year and figure out, did you actually spend that much?
Someone came on the podcast and they're like, I have no idea. How do I do that? So I said, get your big numbers and just look up your credit card bill for the last 3 months and use that as your number. Well, that was an extraordinary month. I said, just pretend it's every month because every month it will be.
Because it's not everything the same month. It's not like your power bill. Like there's lumpiness in spending.
Exactly right. Exactly right. What do you think is misunderstood out in the universe of consumers, of clients out there about the work that CFPs and CFAs and wealth managers do? What do you think that people still don't get?
They probably still think we're all just trying to make a sales commission, would be my guess. Financial advisor, again, the reason I'm fine at a party saying I'm a financial advisor and not try to make it anything fancy like I help people accomplish their goals and dreams or whatever those elevator pitches are that the consultants tell you, is because, most people still have a negative assumption about what financial advisors do, that we're sitting at the desk, calling people about stocks, trying to make a sale and a commission, and that there's this, adversary relationship going on there.
They think it's Josh Brown 15 years ago.
Or 20, however long that was.
20 years
We're getting
ago.
older.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people don't know, but the people who know and know that they want that, it's pretty easy for them to find a CFP. They figured it out. I need somebody to help me figure out how to save and invest for retirement or whatever the goal is. They get it.
Do you think that we kind of blew the whole fiduciary conversation?
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is one of the bugaboos that I have, which is after the financial crisis, it could have been a great moment for every single one of these firms to come out and be like, you know what? We're fiduciaries. We put you first at all times. And they're also freaked out by litigation. But those lawsuits are going to come no matter what. So what is it like that everyone's so scared about? Could you imagine going to a doctor or a lawyer or a CPA and they're like, they may tell you what's suitable for you, but it may not be in your best interest. That is insanity. That's not a profession, is it?
We don't have a profession. I mean, that's what it all boils down to is we never had one. We've got a patchwork of credentials. Some of them are great with continuing education, but we never had a profession.
Right.
We missed it. It was like you had to become a profession in the early 1900s. Otherwise, you're done.
Well, I mean, I always thought that maybe if like the universe aligned that we could get there. I do think, I think that like regulation is kind of catching up to where we should be. Yes, but I kind of do feel like it's a little late. Like, all right, your best effort, that's nice. But like, why is it so hard to say, which I asked a CEO of one of these big firms, why is it so hard to say that we put your best interest first?
Well, that's not their business model. I mean, the whole business model of the broker-dealer exception was that they aren't held to a fiduciary standard, and that's what those companies are built around. So they're not going to change their stripes because they have shareholders, they have managers to pay, right? They have profits to make. So that's just not the business model. And unfortunately, the lobbying effort behind that is so strong that, you've seen efforts by the DOJ to try to tackle it from the retirement angle. So I don't know. I mean, I always think that it takes a catastrophe for something like that to
That's
really
why
change.
I thought after the financial crisis, it would
might
be
happen.
fantastic. That was like the moment, like you're on your knees. That's when the regulators could have said, okay, you're on your knees. Here's the new rules. You want the money? Here's the rules.
Right.
I know we blew it. So remind me about the op-ed that you wrote, which is how we first became girlfriends. Right? So what was the nature of the op-ed? Tell everybody, and maybe we'll even put a link to it in our show notes.
Well, the title was salacious. Of course, the New York Times wrote the title.
How dare they?
But I knew what the working kind of concept was because I had written on my blog, The Bell Curve, something similar. And the reason I wrote it, by the way, the title is Consider Firing Your Mail Broker. Okay. So I had written an article about why women stereotypically have the characteristics that made them better investors, better advisors, and how there aren't enough women in the advisory space. And at that time, I'd been working 12 or 13 years, hadn't seen the needle move. And I wanted to just point it out, like, this is a great career women stereotypically are well suited to listen to people, to try to help them. It can be fulfilling. And oh, by the way, you have control over your time, and it might actually be lucrative. So I was trying to convince more women to come into the profession. Probably didn't. I don't know if it moved the needle or not. Hopefully there are some young women who have read that and other things and have said, okay, it's not.
It hasn't really moved the needle. So I think it's still like 25% of CFPs, 20 to 25% are women. It's sort of been stuck there. And like far fewer if you, God forbid, you want a Black woman, because the numbers for CFPs of color are abysmal. Right. Absolutely abysmal. And so we need more women, more people of color, and we need people helping their communities. I met you through that because I was talking to Michael Goodman about it. He's like, I know Blair. And then I was like, hook me up, brother. And we brought you on the show, which was fantastic. And then how long did the effect of writing that kind of op-ed, how did that impact your career and your practice?
Well, the best thing that happened is I'm on the wall here in the office next to all the other writers. And hopefully it'll stay up there for a while before somebody writes something worthy of moving that space.
No, you will not. You are the queen.
So there was a lot of media frenzy. You know, CNBC wanted me on there the first day. That died down pretty quickly. But every now and then I still have people reach out who have read it and who want to talk to me or who want me to be on their podcast. So it still lives on today.
That's so great. And what do you write the podcast, the blog? Like, what does that serve for you? The Bell Curve is your blog. Everyone should subscribe to it. What purpose does that serve for you?
I love writing, a writer's going to write. So that's the purpose it serves for me. And the content comes from, sometimes I'll get the same question from clients 3 times and I know there's a blog post there. Or sometimes what's going on in my daily work and the news coincides, or there's something that I feel very strongly. I know when I'm like mad or angry about something, those are some of the best posts. Like
really?
When I have
like
a chip
what?
on my shoulder.
Tell us more.
When I went after insurance is not an investment, you know, those kind of things. That's when we had like people calling in that wanted to chew me out about that one.
So what's funny about that is when I talk to, I have a podcast, I have a radio show, and sometimes they'll say to me like, blankety blank insurance company wants to. I'm like, okay, but just to be clear, they should read some of the things I've written or they should listen to the show because I'm better at it now, but I started because soon after I came out of the advisory business and I came into media, the problem was that often I would inherit a big problem, and many of the biggest problems I ever inherited were from insurance products, and they're hard to undo. They're really hard to undo. So I was bitter about that. Now I'm trying to say, okay, I have to believe there are some well-meaning people in this industry. Please come forward. I'd love to talk to you. Like, let me just know. Like, you do need insurance.
A lot of people need insurance.
You need insurance. It's just that it cannot be that you create a profession where every single problem is solved with insurance.
Right.
It's impossible.
And annuities.
Okay. So can you school me? What about, should I be on the lookout for interesting, lower cost annuity products? Are there any out there?
You probably should because, interest rates are out of the tank.
That's it.
And the best use of an annuity is to secure a fixed income stream for the rest of your life.
Right.
So absolutely, I think there are a lot of American retirees who should probably delay their Social Security as long as they can and take a chunk of their savings and lock in the rest of their basic spending needs with an annuity. Now, it did make sense for a long time because the higher the interest rate, the more income you get. So you'd have to fork over tons of savings to get that income with low interest rates. That's the best use of them. Just so happens that annuity salespeople are not incentivized in terms of commission to sell those as much as they are those variable products and all that.
Right, because these are immediate annuities. The chunk of money goes in. You start the clock.
You get a paycheck for life, whether you live to 88, 99, or 105. You've just secured your income.
And the incentive is off, right? Because we know that.
Right.
It's the same thing. Like you make piddly squat on a term life insurance policy, you make a lot of money on a whole life policy. So when is a whole life policy actually on the table? I say whole life. When is a permanent policy on the table for you as an advisor?
If there's an estate tax.
Yes, because you know what? We need something for your entire life.
It's very few people now because the estate tax exemption at the federal level is $26
Except
million.
your clients with their $7 million and more.
Right. Children with special needs.
Yeah.
Right. So a term means I'm buying cheap insurance while my kids are young, and one day I won't need that insurance anymore because they won't be reliant on my income. But business owners, right?
Buy-sell agreement?
What happens to my business partner if I die and my wife owns my share? I want to have the liquidity of the insurance product for that. I'm sure there's a few that I've missed.
But that's a pretty small number of folks out there who should be thinking about that. And as you said, these products that are sold, not purchased. Like someone said, I was so stupid to buy this. I said, no, you really weren't. It was sold to you.
Right.
It really was. And so what do people, when you inherit one of these annuities, like you've got some old, I have a equity index annuity and I can't lose money on the way down and I give up a little bit on the way up. How do you explain that to the people who've already made the decision? They have gotten themselves that product. What do you do with that? Because you don't want to make them feel like an idiot.
Well, if they're talking to me, they've probably realized they need to make a change.
Yeah.
But these things can't just be blown out of immediately. There's consequences. So the first thing we have to do is review. What have you bought? Is there a charge to get out? Is there a tax consequence to get out? And is there some value here? Sometimes you happen to have timed the annuity at the right point and it's worth more than it would have been in the market. And so maybe you do make the decision to annuitize and take an income stream for life. So we have to evaluate it on its merits at that moment and try to figure out what is the best way to maximize whatever this is for this client today.
So what do you think of the idea of, through 401ks where they want to bring in this idea of we want to provide people income for life? I feel like this is such a massive land grab for insurance companies, and I'm trying to be open-minded, but it's very hard. So is there a case to be able to put an immediate annuity option in a 401k plan?
If done right, absolutely. That could be a great, this concept has been around for hundreds of years. Pool all of your money and get the mortality credits because we don't know how long we're going to live. Somebody's going to die first, so we can get more income out of it by pooling that risk together. The concept on its face is excellent and probably would be well suited for a large number of American savers and retirers. The problem is they're going to be loaded with expensive products and they're going to end up worse off than probably just saving and investing in stocks and bonds. And that's unfortunate.
So if you're called to testify in an ERISA hearing because they say we need someone who's unbiased, is that going to be your line? Like, yes, if you have a low-cost immediate annuity option, great. But otherwise, caveat emptor, buyer beware.
This is a tough one because let's say it's a federal rules board that wants to hear testimony.
Yes.
We have 50 state insurance commissioners.
Right.
So this is not an easy task to reform the insurance industry. I think it's worth pursuing, but unfortunately, that's going to be a long haul. And I don't think it's as simple as saying just make it low cost because I do believe in a profit motive. I am a capitalist. I know people have to make a living, but we have to figure out a way to stop incentivizing salespeople to sell expensive products that are not serving the clients. I don't have the answers, but I'd be willing to testify. I'd have to probably study up, though.
Okay, of course you would. So A student. Fill in the blank. Annuities are?
Expensive.
Okay, next. Give me one other. What else?
Annuities are boring.
Okay. And one more. Give me a positive spin.
Secure.
Okay. I like that. So annuities are expensive, boring, and secure. Also, the other problem with annuities, of course, is that they are illiquid right? So that's one other aspect. This is my bugaboo in general. Why are people soaking up all their liquidity doing dumb shit?
They're scared, right? So annuities know, like, okay, there was a crisis. Now we can convince people that this is some sort of protective measure.
Right.
Right. Or whatever the reason of the day. And the insurance companies know no matter what happens in the market, we can hedge this, we can make a profit. So, it's it's just such a great concept with such a terrible structure.
Well, even beyond that, like this whole idea that people desperately want to pay down their 3% mortgages. I'm shocked the number of questions I still receive about this. I'm shocked. And and the only way I can convince them is like, well, what if something bad happens in your life and you want that money back? It's not, because the math behind it
doesn't make sense.
does not, I mean, they know it on some level, but emotionally it would feel so good. So how do you manage that?
I've never had anybody regret paying off a mortgage. However, there is the black and white answer, which is if you think you can earn more on your money than your mortgage rate, you should not pay off your mortgage early, right? And some people took the other direction and took out equity from their homes at 2.75 and 3% and said, no, I want to invest that somewhere else. So it's really about comfort and risk tolerance. It's not really, debt is something that you don't have enough money to pay for. Leverage is a use of your balance sheet to use the debt to invest in other things, right? And that's what I always say, wealthy people use leverage. And however, I have never had anybody regret paying off their mortgage. So if they want to do it after learning the black and white numbers, so be it.
What's the mortgage rate on your home?
I just bought it. Well, a year and a half ago.
What? Because you have
Yes.
so many $7 million customers, you could buy a bigger house?
It was the moment that I could buy the family home and interest rates had gone up. So it's 5.375. It's a 5-year ARM. So Powell needs to get on that rate cut.
All right, it's on. He's on it. He's got you in mind.
Okay.
What is your view on when a client comes to you and asks you to do something and you're like, that is stupid, and you're in your head, and they still go ahead and do it? What do? Do you have to document that? Are you worried? Like, what happens for you?
Well, first of all, any conversation or meeting I have with a client, I take notes. And that's not really because I'm trying to cover liability or anything. It's because that's how I'm a good advisor.
Yeah.
Right? Because I need to remember what the last conversation is. But if they come to me with something that I don't agree with, I ask questions. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about what happens if this goes wrong? Have you thought about how long your money may be locked up? Whatever the questions are. And then if they're still wanting to do something that I would never recommend, we talk about, well, what's the appropriate amount of your net worth to be associated with this?
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
What is the appropriate amount of net worth that you would suggest people have in their company stock?
Well, it depends. If it's a public company where you're
Let's
purchasing
say public.
stock.
We'll say
okay.
public.
Probably zero.
That's interesting. Okay, I'm looser than you are. I say, okay, 5% of your invested assets you can have in whatever you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, if it's NVIDIA, obviously 100% this year. But
this year only, maybe last year.
I went through that. I worked at a bank and I did the share purchase program when I was making like no money and bought these options. And 15 years later, poof, the money was gone. So I'm a little bit jaded from that experience. But look, if you believe in the company you work for and have some sort of information about how they treat their people and the service you're providing, it's not a bad thing to have 5% go into the stock.
You'll go for 5.
Right.
All right. What's your favorite movie about the financial world?
None of them.
Really?
Aren't they all like terrible? They're talk about show the bad stuff. It's like somebody needs to make the positive movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Do they?
It wouldn't be entertaining. It wouldn't be entertaining.
What about The Big Short? Did you that as an explainer?
The Big Short, I loved the book because I love Michael Lewis.
Yes.
Okay, so here's
a
the
New
funny
Orleans boy.
Here's the funny thing about The Big Short. They filmed it in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I remember when in my office building, they like took down the little thing and put up Lehman Brothers in the lobby that day.
That's funny.
And Brad Pitt was going up and down the elevators. And then I'm watching the movie and they're supposed to be at an airport and I know it's the convention center. So the movie was very distracting for me.
Oh, I see. You were like, that's not the real thing. But it was a good explainer, right?
It was.
Okay.
It was.
What about the movie Wall Street?
So I loved the movie Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I wasn't supposed to because Quentin Tarantino has said it was not supposed to entice me to go into the business, but it did.
It was a time.
Great characters.
Yeah. My favorite movie of all time is Trading Places because it was filmed on the Commodities Exchange where I was a young pup trader. And the reason I love that is that it captures like the scenes on the floor are actually fairly accurate.
Yeah.
Not that there's a crop report coming out and everyone's quiet, but the idea that everyone thinks they know something and no one knows anything, which I love. I love that. Well, what else do I need to know about the career of the queen of Ritholtz Wealth Management? Tell us like some parting wisdom. If anyone is either in the business or consider, let's talk to people who are in the business. Like, what do you want to tell like young advisors right now? They're CFPs, they're CFAs, or they're like chained to their desks at a horrible Wirehouse job. They hate it, but they're scared. What should these younger folks know?
The most important thing you can do is find an advisor that you respect to apprentice under. That's the only way to learn to become a good advisor, is to sit in a client meeting with a mentor, hear how they respond to client questions that they didn't prepare for, and then slowly start to become involved in that meeting process until one day you take over. And when you do, it's always going to feel scary at first. When you're the lead advisor in the beginning, it's always going to be scary until you start to develop a level of comfort. And the best thing you can do, because if you've got your CFP, you know how to do a financial plan, is to study psychology and all the softer side skills that you need. George Kinder has some great training and books on how to do life planning, how to motivate people, how to be a better listener. So seek out those kind of books and podcasts and knowledge, and less so about markets and financial planning. Because if you've passed the CFP, you know how to do it.
Yeah. And also, when we talk about financial advisory and, going back to the beginning between accurate and precision, the way I've always thought about financial planning is the way that my surgeon friend likes to talk about medicine. She's like, it's only half science. The other half is art.
Wow.
And to be clear, that is exactly the world of investment advice and financial planning. Is it a complete ripoff to pay somebody to manage your money but not get financial advice? Is that a ripoff?
I believe so. Unless it's very specifically like, I am going to allocate a part of my portfolio to this active strategy as an investment manager, not as a financial advisor, right? I'm going to put money with this private equity fund or this manager of small cap stocks. Other than that, if you're paying a financial advisor, they should be doing financial planning for you.
God damn it, you're right.
Because it's free. You can get it. You can get it for free.
Well, I mean, this is the difference in how the business has evolved since we, or you especially, and me 100 years before you, really entered it. And I think that that's actually the positive change. That it used to be that a company was like, I will manage your money and I'll throw in a financial plan for free, right? And now the smartest advisors, the CFPs, the CFAs, even the CPAs who have that other designation, PFS, right? Which is like a goofy group of, they look at their shoes first, but then do look up at you.
Yes.
Those folks, I think that all those people understand that they lead with the consultative relationship. Let me figure out who my client is, and then we'll use those investments to get you where you need to go. But it's just not the most important thing. All right, last question. What is the biggest mistake that people make in their total financial planning picture? What do you think is the most common, biggest mistake?
Not having a plan.
There you go.
And then, but on the flip side, very few retirees who have money spend their money. They die with more.
They freaked out. They don't know how to enjoy themselves.
Yeah, they die with more. And look, if you have a huge philanthropic goal, if you really want to leave all your money to your children, go for it. But you should also, and I always say, you've got to enjoy the fruits of your labor. What was the point?
I know.
Money's just a tool.
And also, like, you can enjoy a little bit on the way, too.
Right.
It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
And I'm doing that right now, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to maximize my savings. My kids are only going to be 4 and 7 1 year. Like, I need to pay up Disney World, I think.
Really?
I got to do it soon.
Did you hear the boys talking about Disney on the recent podcast? And I wanted to ask, you are close to Disney. Is that, are your kids 7 is okay. 4 is too young?
4 is probably too young. But if I wait too long, I don't know. I probably would have.
I'm thinking 10 and 7 is good.
Probably.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you a fan of Disney or like amusement parks?
I love roller coasters, but that's not Disney. Right. So I love thrill rides.
Yeah.
I can appreciate Disney. I can appreciate the artistry, the detail that went into it. I had a friend who in college went and worked at Disney, and so I know a little bit of the behind
My
the
nephew was
scenes.
dressed up as one of the characters for a semester.
Mhm.
What is the best restaurant in New Orleans that I've never heard of?
So the new one, you might have heard of it because he just won the James Beard Award, is
Oh.
Dakar.
Okay.
It's Senegalese food.
When I come to New Orleans and I stay at your fancy big house with your
I have a guest suite.
5.25% or 5.75%, will you be able to get me a reservation?
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Can you get me tickets to Taylor Swift in New Orleans?
No.
Really?
I assume.
Don't you know people?
I assume if you just go, like, if you're willing to pay for it, I assume that
No,
there's gonna
I'm
be a
thinking that
secondary
you know
market.
somebody. You have somebody
I'm
who's
sure
like,
if I really if my life depended on it, I'm sure I could find somebody.
I just made an ask of my friend who works at Royal Bank of Canada because I found out they were the sponsor of the Taylor Swift tour in Canada.
Wow.
And I'm like, how about if I come up to Toronto and you get me some tickets? So that's the angle I'm working. It's a little niece present.
So you really want to see Taylor Swift that bad?
I want to bring my niece and,
Yes.
and I want to
Okay.
like just do something fun with her. It'll
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah.
Anyway, Blair duQuesnay, any questions for me before we wrap up?
When can I do this again?
Whenever you want.
Okay.
I think you're amazing. I think we could do like, what do you think about this, guys? What about an Ask the Compound with Blair and Jill? And it will be the estrogen version, although my estrogen levels are way down post-menopause.
I love it because, and we got to talk about that, but I have questions. But I love when you do the listener questions because it's like watching me do a financial plan.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so I would be all about that.
It's great. And of course, when I am a participant in Ask the Compound, they get the questions ahead of time and they'll say, do you want the question? I said, no, don't send me the questions. That's no fun.
Right.
So it's much more fun. So anytime, the queen of Ritholtz Wealth Management, Blair, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jill.
All right. If you've got questions for Blair or for me, go to JillOnMoney.com, click the contact us button, leave us a note here. Thank you so much for watching. We love you and we love you advisors. So keep watching us. We'll be talking to you next time.